Hi, my name is Rachel and welcome back to Auxhart Gardening. Today I am talking about how to harvest tomatoes and more specifically how to know when to pick your tomatoes. So I know that when I was first growing tomatoes, I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. I mean, do any of us really know what we're doing? But thinking about harvesting your tomatoes might seem simple, but it's okay if you have come to this video and you don't know what you're doing. That's why I'm here. So when your tomato starts to fruit, the very first thing you're going to see are these yellow flowers. And these yellow flowers, as you can see, will eventually die after they have been pollinated, and then they will usually set fruit. And at this point you can tell that it has set the fruit because the flower is dead, but the rest of this green bit it's still green. It hasn't dried up with the flower. That's usually a good sign that it has been pollinated and it is starting to make fruit for you. Next, you'll start seeing little baby tomatoes coming onto your plant, and they will generally be a little bit fuzzy and very, very cute. As your tomatoes grow, you'll notice at some point that they start becoming shiny instead of looking fuzzy. And this is when the tomato really has stopped growing and is starting to ripen. Waiting for your tomatoes to ripen is honestly the hardest part. The amount of time it takes your tomato to grow from little baby to full size is about the same amount of time that you have to wait again for it to ripen. And you can come back day after day, which I have totally done, and your tomatoes are still green. They haven't started turning red yet, and it can be frustrating, but I promise it will happen. So just be patient and wait until your tomatoes look like this. This is what we call a blushing tomato. This tomato has just barely started turning red. And at this point, you could pick your tomato, but you don't have to. The thing with tomatoes is that you can pick them as soon as they start getting that little bit of red on them, and they will continue to ripen off the vine. However, a lot of people will tell you that this is not how you get the sweetest tomato. The thing that you have to do to get the sweetest tomato is to wait for it to turn entirely red on the vine, and you should probably dehydrate it a little bit. Once your tomato has started to ripen is probably the time that you need to start watching it the closest, because at this point, if your tomato gets too much water, the tomato could burst or rip. And what happens is when the plant gets a lot of water, it just pulls it all up in like it normally does, but because that fruit is starting to ripen, the skin doesn't have any more stretch left in it. It's not ready to grow anymore, and sometimes you'll see the tomato start to split kind of like this. This is a very mild example of it, but you can see right here at the top, this tomato has started to split a little bit, and this one hasn't started to blush yet, but it is very, very close. And so since it has stopped growing and it got a lot of rain the other day, it has started to split and crack a little bit. So when you're thinking about picking your tomatoes, you're going to encounter this trade-off. If you leave your tomato on the vine to ripen fully, you have a chance of getting a sweeter fruit, because as the tomato ripens on the vine, you can dehydrate the plant and you can concentrate those sugars in the fruit and get a sweeter fruit. However, if you leave the tomato on the vine and you don't properly dehydrate your plants, if it rains, something out of your control, then you can end up with split fruit. And if you don't notice it immediately, then sometimes this will get gross and rotten, and then your fruit is destroyed. The other option is to wait until you see that first blush and pick your tomatoes right away, and they will ripen on the counter and they will still be delicious, and you are avoiding that risk of having them split or having any other critters get to them that might get to them. And so honestly, at the end of the day, it is up to you as the gardener to make this decision for yourself and your circumstances. Is this worth it to you to leave it on the vine? Do you have the control over the irrigation in order to make sure that you get a really, really good fruit? Or are you willing to take a perhaps teeny tiny bit less than perfect fruit in order to know that you're going to have that harvest and you're going to be able to eat the fruit that you've spent so much time growing? So for me, personally, I do pull my fruit just a little bit early, and it's because of where I live. Where I live right now in the summer, we have thunderstorms that pop up almost every afternoon. And because of that, and because my garden is outdoors, I can't control when my tomatoes are getting watered or how much water is going to fall on them when that afternoon thunderstorm pops up. And I can't plan to pick my tomatoes before that because oftentimes the thunderstorm pops up randomly, or the weather says it's going to pop up and then it doesn't, and you just never really know. And so usually I get my tomatoes right when they're first blushing, because tomatoes here are prone to cracking, and I would rather have an edible tomato than spend a lot of time worrying about getting the absolute perfect tomato. Okay, so the last and possibly most crucial step here is how you harvest your tomato. You might see some people just pull them off the vine, and if you're waiting for them to get super ripe, they might just come off the vine very easily. But for me, it's important that I use clippers, because pulling the tomatoes right as they're blushing, they're still not falling off the vine very easily. And if I was to try and just yank them off the vine with one or even two hands or twist them off, there's a good chance that I'm going to damage my plant, and I don't want that. So I'm always going to bring my clippers for harvesting my tomatoes. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy gardening.